want a photograph every 8 months because muons are needed. If there are no muons, the film is not exposed. Nobody, on the other hand, was impressed by the fact that we conducted similar research, discovering 99.9% more of everything there is without spending a damn thing and staying at home.
But the problem is, you see,
what all the newspapers brought out with great fanfare at the time of the famous scan pyramid is, we found 2 voids, one big and one little. The big void, which you see in the center, which they illustrate with this little drawing here, in other scientific articles, it is bent. That is, it has a bend. For what reason? Because the authors themselves say it in the scientific work. We don't really know if this big void is in a horizontal line or in a bent. It has an angle. Why don't we know? Because we found only 5 muons that passed through there and then came to our camera. 5 muons over a distance of 70 meters. I mean, couldn't it be 5 small big voids stuck to each other? We will never know. How tall is this big void? We will never know. Why can't it be known? Because this is the limitation of the technique. So, you understand well that in 1968, you say it was impossible for the 4 external ZDs to be seen at all. And the intermediate Z, when 3 muons pass through there and by chance they collide, they interact with the empty parts of the Z, which are numerous because they are essentially the 70, the Z is 70% empty if you think about it in terms of volume. So it's impossible with this technique, but they know there's something inside there. It also likely bothers them that we have found something, so they are trying to catch up by also trying to say, and rightly, we care for them a lot, because then they will say they have discovered some little rooms, 2 or 3 of the ones we have already discovered today. And we are pleased about that. So here we need to talk about the structural data of the pyramid. Why can't we actually see the structure that we know? It's hardly visible. Because the pyramid is made that way. If it's not done like that, a billion tons of whatever it is sinks into the sand. If there isn't a slab that supports it, this slab essentially sinks into the sand. And today, we would have the structure of the pyramid of Khafre 50 meters underground because you cannot build anything on the slab. So, this slab essentially, we can see it in a first approximation, either from the right or from the left. If we look at it from the left, let's pretend it's a beam. This beam is supported by 4 poles, which are the 4 pipes we see in front. And this, he says, all right, at the center of the pyramid, I have the right support so things don't collapse. But if we look at the pyramid from over there, that is from the right, we notice that the beam showing the cross-section of the pyramid is essentially a double cantilever beam. That is, there's 2 things in the middle, and here 2 small wings that hang. And so what you see, especially at the bottom on the left, is the flexion graph. Like this, like this, like this, the flexion graph. The more weight you put in the middle and the more you shorten the distance between the 2 supports, the higher the graph goes, drops down, rises back up, and drops again. You know, you see that they seem like the tensors, the cables of the Brooklyn Bridge. Do you understand why the Brooklyn Bridge is made that way? Because it follows the bending moment diagram of the cables. Now, granite, the rock, let's say, in general, granite in particular, withstands pressure excellently, practically doesn't undergo deformation, even under infinite pressure. But when sheared, that is, to a thin slice of granite that breaks it won't hold. If you hit granite hard with a hammer, it will break. But if you try to press it, rest assured, you will never manage. So we had to do a bit more precise calculation. We thought there was a plate that supported the pyramid. And maybe these 8 objects are used to support the entire plate that in turn supports the pyramid, because otherwise everything falls to the ground. So in this graph, without me showing you the numbers, we calculated the size of the plate to see how high it needs to be. Why am I telling you this?
Why this thing?
The plate is there. It can be seen. And there are these gigantic stones that not only occupy the opening of the pyramid, as in this rough calculation, if you like, but they extend even further, increasing the support surface.
So I asked artificial intelligence, Tapiches, then we checked the calculations, but artificial intelligence says minimum thickness of the plate is 4.5 meters, otherwise everything collapses, meaning it sinks by at least 10 meters.
Considerations. Hey, you should put some poles in.
Oh, and artificial intelligence says it. I didn't say it, Zahi Hawass didn't say it. And so we redid the calculation. And redoing the calculation, tada, you gain by putting in pillars.
As we designed them, with the dimensions we more or less see from the tomographies, 31%.
That is, it doesn't sink more than 10 meters. It sinks 6 meters, essentially, the settlement. But I calculated the plate that had the same dimensions as the pyramid, not a plate that expands 15 or 20 meters outside, because then surely even more the pyramid doesn't fall.
Do you want to see that these objects have at least one function?
At least one function, like supporting. Because if not, and then, damn it, we asked ourselves, what about the other pyramids? And that's when we went to take a look at the old tomographies, the ones on the Pyramid of Cheops. And then we realized that we hadn't noticed. But damn it, there are also objects descending there in the Pyramid of Khafre, in the Pyramid of Miserinus. And look, this is a section. In this section, you see how we place the known stuff at the level of the plate. What you see is that we cannot see, except in a way. There is a scientific term that is humorously referred to as by accident, the vibrations of this entire dark path, because it falls within this giant plate, which will nevertheless absorb all the vibrations. The signal-to-noise ratio is unfavorable for seeing. But the roof extends. The roof of Belzoni's chamber extends out of the slab. It's higher. And therefore, essentially, all the vibrations inside the slab are not visible, but the vibrations outside are. But what is the point of building this something? It makes sense, because if we, who have always maintained that the pyramid is a tool, a bell that serves to gather vibrational information, force and bring them to the floor below, the vibrations pass through the roof of Belzoni's pyramid, which must be outside this kind of hard base that would absorb all the vibrations and wouldn't do what we have already decided it does in the past, let's call it episodes. We had to take a look at this point, first look at the plane, the Egyptian plane. There is stuff down here that we haven't noticed, we haven't seen. For crying out loud, how do we do it? So what needs to be done? We need to widen the spectrum. So make the tomography larger, go further down, more to the right, more to the left.
This requires more machine time because it's the Fourier transform.
Each brushstroke that we apply to this photograph, it is spread over a larger number of square pixels, so it takes a lot of time. So let's take the pyramid and make a cut in the middle.
I remind you where the north is. Look, the north is at the bottom, so that's where you enter. This is a satellite central image, not an optical image, so you see it slightly distorted. Well, on the right and on the left, you see how it appears to us. The cut of the film, right? We are cutting the cake like this. We cut the pyramid in the middle of Khafre in two. For anyone observing the scene from the right, they will see the pyramid of Khafre as that object that resonates best because the cut was made right there in the middle. The pyramid of Khnum Khufu appears behind us, while the small pyramid appears farther away, as seen essentially by an optical one who sees. What would you see? You would see the photograph as it appears on the left, meaning almost one behind the other, the three pyramids. But look, pay attention. The pyramid we are viewing with the central topographic section is the pyramid of Khafre. But notice that while we are looking at the pyramid of Khafre, you have to realize that behind it is a bit of Menkaure on the left, and in front on the right, there is the nuisance of the pyramid of Khnum Khufu, which will somehow do something that what we see here might be due to the pyramid of Khnum Khufu. This is the valley. In the middle, you have the little triangle. You recognize it. The pyramid of Khafre, you see the black cone that descends, which corresponds to the two edges, the one in front of you and the one on the other side behind, which do not vibrate. You see a sort of object in the center here that descends slightly bent and is the sum of the first tadpoles of all 8 tubes that descend, since it's attached nearby. On the plate, you can clearly see that it vibrates a lot, because you can clearly see the things that are attached to other things that vibrate a lot. I would like to point out that a similar structure can be found on the right. Do you see that there is a brighter path at a certain point on the right, and at the top, this tadpole that descends, the first tadpole that descends and occupies a certain number of tubes, at the top, there is the edge of the pyramid of Khnum Khufu.
So, under the pyramid of Khnum Khufu, there are also things descending. First observation. Second observation. Let's look
In the center, where the arrow is,
Actually, I should tell you to look at the bottom left. At the bottom left, there is a luminous structure. This luminous structure is basically right under the pyramid of Menkaure. Well, if it's a luminous thing, it's something that vibrates, it's something different. Well, I point this out because later we will also have to bother Menkaure. The central arrow shows you the usual glowing quadrilateral square that you see due to this fake 3D effect caused by the fact that the alignment between the pi folding of the radar is not the same as the folding of the tomographic image, which should technically be vertical, thus giving us a distorted verticality response. This helps us because it gives the idea of a three-dimensionality that isn't there. There, in the middle, are the famous big cubes. So, at the level of the arrow, it is 648 meters from ground zero. But there are 600 more below of stuff underneath. I will point it out to you. Let's see the big cubes up close. You can see basically the edges of the cubes, how they are made, because they have been highlighted. And these edges evidently must have a strong vibration because from a lighting perspective, the edge in this context is always very prominent. And there are two cubes, and they are separated. In between the cubes, there must be that smaller box I was showing you earlier. Do you know what the dark stripe descending on the right is? It's the two edges of the pyramid of Khnum Khufu, which we see in front on the right, but is actually behind. To the camera, because the camera took an image that goes forward and backward and compressed all the information onto a single plane. So this is to say Let's get even closer. You can see even better the cubic structures, which moreover, the computer said are large cubes.
And there, obviously, you can see other things, which we do not know what it is, because the only way to understand it is to go there.
And what is this stuff here? This reflection here?
This reflection here.
At the beginning, as usual, it's a reflection. Yeah, no, it's not a reflection. Let's look at it closely.
When we look closely, we compact it with the tripe effect that we can make. So we make the pyramid appear as a real pyramid, well made in the center. You see how the darker vibration in the center becomes even more effective. We have launched, how do you say, increased all the black and all the white a lot more. We have spaced them out somehow. It's more visible. And the thing descending, you see that it's actually a kind of black square descending with two paths that are
Almost parallel to each other as they descend. But we have seen these somewhere before. But what is this stuff? And look.
Let's take the two models of the two pyramids as they are, and we discover that yes, under the pyramid of Knumku, which is on the right, and in the tomography, corresponds to something behind the observer. There are these two little jerks going downwards.
That you see them from above and you see them bent like this.
In this model, the distances have been respected. That is a scale model. This one, also with the distances. So what the heck is this stuff here? Something that's under the pyramid of Knumku. We find it again in this tomography. See how it is? The pyramid of Knumku is the one in front, but which is behind the observer because we've cut the cake in half of Khafre behind. Underneath, you can clearly see that in the same position of the work we published on motosensing, which a female Egyptologist said, but they are just light spots. You can't see anything.
Maybe it would be better if she looked at it again. Perhaps she's colorblind, who knows?
Let's look at the situation from above. This is the situation from above. You see, there are the two pyramids that we have placed with the correct dimensions. There's the Sphinx on the right. Let's see if we can somehow do a three-dimensional tomography.
And if we do a 3D tomography at a certain point, we can go under the pyramid, under the... and see. Oh, but what's there?
Underneath, look at what a little den is there, what a wonder. And at this point, it's clear that starting from this situation, we could somehow build a three-dimensional scenario, which we will do soon, on the whole Giza Plateau. Because you can no longer say, I studied the Pyramid of Khafre, or I studied the Sphinx. There, you must study everything as a whole, as May rightly says, in a single context. Let's return to this image that has been provided to us. This is the Space Chapel, which has the largest resolution in the world, so it couldn't get better than this. What is all that stuff that is essentially, from our point of view, under the pyramid and partly of Khafre and under the pyramid of Khufu? What is all that stuff? Let's take a better look. We have moved slightly.
You see, the pyramid of Khafre is in the middle, but while before the
highest point of the pyramid and the two sides were one on the right and the other on the left. Now they are in this other way. This means that we have shifted the tomography in this way here.
And you watch and discover, take a general look so you realize that there are things that go down, and then we'll understand why there is so much confusion.
But down below toward the bottom,
that are 1,200 meters from the baseline. There are square, quadriform structures, like Roman cities, essentially, which indicate structures that definitely cannot have been made randomly. You can clearly see everything we have seen and more. There are things, and there are many things. This is a amplification, and you see these structures. Now you can see what you see, but there are vertical situations, horizontal situations, and practically these situations are geometrically linked to X, Y, Z at all angles of 90 degrees. Now, you can't tell me that these structures are invented, that they don't exist, because this is a tomography. That is, it's a sound photograph, not an interpretation by the first person who walks by. This tomography here essentially shows you the cut we made, and from here you can see something fundamental. Look how much stuff is coming down. So, we will also have to review the tomographies we have already done previously to verify, and something we are partly doing, even under the pyramid of Khufu. Look, compacting another tomography, you see that we always place Khafre at the center because it was our starting point, but below, we are interested below, you see, the central part is the columns descending, this stuff here that goes down. We have put them together, and it basically becomes a single object descending. However, if you notice, and you can see it in the latest tomography, there are essentially square structures. Let me show you better. And you see, here are the shafts that go down. Then finally, the single block dematerializes, and you can also see all the fingers of this structure. But on the side, if you pay attention, there are rectangular structures. I will show them to you better. Here it is. Now that you've seen them, I'll outline them for you so you can see them with your own eyes. It's a bit like the game of the nail in the wall. These are very large structures, especially height, length, width, etc., etc. What you are seeing is that this structure has as its center this giant square, the column of columns that descends from the pyramid of Khufu. While the brighter one, because it is exactly where we did the tomography, is the one at the center of the tomography, which is in front of us and has nothing to do with the giant square that I am showing you now. This is how tomographies are interpreted once you get the hang of it. Obviously, everything comes proven by horizontal tomography, because now we are scanning the entire plateau. But not satisfied with this, we changed the angle. Let's position it at 90 degrees. 90 degrees, yes, in the true sense of the word. We are in a stroke of luck. We are in a stroke of luck, says my uncle Skevola. You see the tomographic line. It goes from the pyramid of Khafre all the way to the left to the Sphinx. Well, at the top, you see the tomography. God damn it! Do you see all that stuff coming down? How much stuff is coming down? If you rightly overlay the tomography on those vertical lines bother an identical number of wells that are in the Giza plain and that no one has ever scientifically bothered with. This means that those wells go down to a depth of 1,200 meters. More or less the same, in some points more, in some points less. And in this tomography, we got carried away by he says, let's take one of these wells, let's go see. And we took one of the brighter ones, meaning it would give us more information on the top left. Yeah, I'll show it to you better. The Well of Osiris. So, the Well of Osiris is that well which somehow is believed to have been the tomb of Osiris. They have told us all sorts of things about it. And I will show you something fundamental. In the Osiris shaft, there are
2 or 3 levels, essentially, that reach up to 35 meters. After that, it's unclear what happens because there's a watercourse surrounding a granite structure where inside it seems there might be a sarcophagus or one of many objects used for putting something inside. If it was a sarcophagus, as the Greeks say, meaning a body eater, or it was a neb-ankh, as the ancient Egyptians called it, neb-ankh means a place where life takes refuge,
which does not mean eater of bodies. So already the wireless telegraph, the wireless phone, in the first translation, they had already messed up the Greeks. So imagine today the Egyptologists.
Well,
We don't know where this water comes from. We don't know where it goes. It's a completely different water from chemical analysis compared to the Nile water, so it follows a completely different path. One of our future goals will be to find the water paths there underneath because they play some strange tricks.
Someone has already studied them from a scientific and technical point of view, but the geological works that I studied and also submitted to the analysis of some geologists I know, I was told that they were poorly written, so all the data needs to be reviewed because there are truly interesting things that we will show next time. Look,
A fundamental feature is that on the second level, the first level is the entrance. On the second level, there is a series of rooms that we will see better where there is a sarcophagus. This sarcophagus has two fundamental characteristics. Of these 6 small rooms that are there, one of these sarcophagi,
that there's essentially only one. In reality, there were 2, but I believe one was removed. It's made of granite that is not found in Africa. I don't know how they put it inside because it doesn't fit through the entrance. It weighs the usual 70 tons, 80, I don't know. It is slightly radioactive, among other things, but probably comes from some mine in Turkey. Now, it should be brought there, and someone should ask us how they brought it. We don't know. So, you see, I've put the map of the path, and next to it, the tomography of the path. As you can see, in the tomography, there's a first vertical path, then there's a first step, a second, and a third. The first dark spots you see in the well are the third level. That is, there we are at 35 meters.
And below?
Below there are things. And further below, there's also a black thing, which is a little room. What do you want it to be? Maybe not. It's a thing of tungsten that will vibrate differently, so it appears black. To me, it seems that it might be more likely to be a small room, or rather a large room. This stuff goes down another 100, 200 meters below you at least, just based on the first calculations of the pixels. This stuff
has never been seen by anyone.
And there is why.
Because you can see it.
Here, this is the structure, and the synthetic aperture radar has captured it exactly. And we identify it exactly because we know how the structure is made. And every time we know how a structure is made and we look at the tomography, we can recognize the colored spots because they correspond to the structure we have. In the pyramid of Kinumkufu, we were advantaged because we had 2 or 3 structures that we knew, and we could recognize them. In the pyramid of Khafre, there was nothing that we knew inside the pyramid. And so we had to work much more to understand what we were facing. So there's a first vertical section where all these little rooms are. In one of these, there's the only remaining sarcophagus. In the lowest part, which it's this, there's the sarcophagus. The large sarcophagus, I don't know what it is, but once again, we have water entering from one side, water exiting from the other, and this object in the water experiencing vibrations. I don't know if it reminds you of anything we discussed in previous conferences here. So at this point, however, we need to say what our eyes have been. Mine, just one, is half blind, but actually one of our eyes has been umbra space. That is this kind of giant umbrella through which its opening allowed us to have a synthetic opening substantially favorable so that we could understand all these things. And the other, the one that allowed us to go even deeper, is umbra space, capella space, which basically, as you can see, is a kind of large, open, rigid sheet that allows us to take out all the data that we essentially extracted, the moral of the story.
One must draw conclusions, and the conclusions are quite simple.
For us, the pyramid is like a safe full of information, and this safe full of information has been closed by somewhat dubious characters who not only prevent us from looking where we should have been looking for a long time, not only us, but also other research groups, but essentially they continuously modify these monuments to prevent us from seeing them in their pure state as they were.
At the beginning, before the modifications were made, it was possible to understand what these pyramids were for. So this synthetic aperture radar, essentially, the two radars we found managed to open this safe. Inside this safe, of course, is what I call the truth, the reality of the facts, the irrefutable reality of the facts. So the synthetic aperture radar becomes once again SAR without any hesitation. Why? Because this will be the drive that will push us forward relentlessly to bring out everything we can from this objective reality, presenting it to those who think that Egyptology ends with H. Thank you.